I just wanted to start by telling you a little bit about the community that we're in. It's a very small rural community. Our hospital's maybe 150, 160 beds. I think we're licensed for 200 and something, but we only use...
Can we have a timeout? I think, do you have her mic for the camera?
Yes.
Do you have her mic for the camera?
No, the only way to get everybody is to mic the room. So Gary's recording everything through his system.
He is, so just make sure that we can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, all right, I'm sorry, start all over, John. We didn't want to miss it, go back.
Okay. So a little bit about our community. We are a very, very small rural community in eastern North Carolina. Our hospital, we operate at about 160 beds. We're licensed for over 200, but don't use them. Treat about 280 stroke patients a year, so we're very small with a small volume. And just a little bit, when we started Compass, when it came time to start, all I could think about was how am I going to work Compass into my already existing stroke program that was brand new. And I got very anxious of what in the world was I thinking, agreeing to do this. My anxiety, I wasn't real anxious when I was at boot camp, but as I approached the day for go live, my anxiety crept way up there, and I contacted Sylvia. I was like, I just really don't know about this. I'm very anxious about it. So I got a lot of reassurance from the team. And again. So when we did launch, some of the things that helped me was you have a PAC checklist. I laminated it. It sits on my desk. I still use it every day. I have a checklist for each and every patient that goes on a patient packet, and that helps keep me organized where I am with each patient, whether they're ready for me to see them in the hospital, or whether they're at their 2-day call point or 30-day call, or their 7 to 14-day visit. And the other thing I do is questions. Don't be afraid to ask the Vanguard site team anything that you need to know or anything you need to run by them to see if they think it would be advantageous. They're a huge, huge support. And so, and Rika will tell you, I contact her frequently for things, so don't be afraid to do that. Shortly after starting Compass, things changed. I was still 180 in my thinking. Not how is Compass going to be a part of my stroke program, but I know they just gift wrapped a stroke program and put it in my lap. So after that hyperacute phase, Compass is my stroke program. So it's a great thing, and it really makes things flow very nicely from their acute phase on through out beyond discharge. So here with us is James Hood. He is a paramedic. He's my backup PAC. A lot of people are looking at nurses, and I really encourage you to kind of think outside the box if you're having a hard time finding a backup. And so he saw patients in clinic yesterday while I was driving here, and he sees patients in the hospital when I need him to. So when I'm having to work through issues for patients, he is someone that gives me great support, and I can bounce ideas off of or call him for recommendations on how we can handle things. As part of our community resources within the Compass program, we do have a community paramedic program, and James heads that up, and he sees the patients 2 days after they go home. So not only do they get a 2-day call, they get a home visit from James, and it's free of charge. It's something that we absorb within our stroke program as far as cost goes. And he'll do falls evaluations, blood pressure checks. He helps them with their medications. Blood sugar checks if they're diabetics, reinforces that stroke education. And he really is a pro at identifying issues. And early on in our program, we had a patient who was blind and was a patient of the VA clinic. And he had everything set up, everything was good to go. I sent James to see him. Well, lo and behold, the VA clinic canceled his appointment. The VA clinic, which I did not know at the time, requires that they rewrite all the prescriptions that the patient is given so that they can be filled. So I was very ignorant as to that. And so he does not have his medications. He cannot afford the medications at his area pharmacy. So this is when we really started to see the inner workings of the community resource network. So contacted Tracey to try and troubleshoot and get this man his medication so he doesn't have another stroke before his 2-week appointment. And Tracey, just as a gold mine and wealth of information and problem solving for me as well, and she was able to make some phone calls, and eventually we were able to get around to a name of a person to contact at the VA where I could get the hard copies of the prescriptions and get them up to her in Greenville. So there was a lot of legwork, but it really sort of forces the issue with connecting your community resources and kind of targeting your key people in your community that can really help you. So when we first started, we had to, establish that initial list of our community resources. And to be honest, when I was first, getting ready for that first meeting with all the community resources, I was clueless. I had no idea what was out there. I knew the bare essentials of home health and outpatient. That was it. And so Sylvia kind of had to prompt me and get me moving on that. And so we had our meeting, but little did I know at that point who would be really the key people that would help me. And it has turned out to be really my key people are our outpatient therapies, Tracey, who is our community pharmacist, and James. And it's because they all know the community really well, much better than I do. And then as I move along, just this past week, I added another one to the list. And as I come up with different resources, I just contact usually Rika and ask that they be added to my list. So not too long ago, I added an aphasia support group that's down in Greenville. And then I've added a trainer that will work with stroke patients post-physical therapy if they want to continue to work. And so just kind of keep thinking outside that box of people that might be able to help your stroke patients and add them onto your support network group. Okay. So the way things go for us at our 7 to 14 day clinic appointment, when we have our Compass Clinic, we call it, on Wednesdays. It's always on Wednesday afternoons, and we'll see 2 or 3 patients every week. And I start off the appointment, and I do the functional assessment piece of it. And then if there are any needs that I've identified through doing that, I'll talk to Dr. Gahlot about those potential needs. And then most of the time we see the patient together, and Dr. Gahlot's up there. But while she's seeing the patient, I'm sitting in there with her. And so we can communicate kind of with the patient and with myself and with her, and it works really well for us. And as we're doing that, there's a APP piece to, Christina, what's it called, the assessment?
APP assessment?
So I have that open, and it calls for the blood pressure to be entered and so forth. And so I enter all that stuff, and then I continue to enter as she's doing her assessment and fill that form out as we go. And then we'll add whatever services and resources that are identified. For us, speech therapy and cognitive therapy are the biggest ones that seem to be left off the list when the patient leaves the hospital. So oftentimes we add that. And I don't know if Dr. Gahlot can hear, if she has anything else to add that we add.
I can hear you, Dawn. Can you hear me?
We can. I was commenting that oftentimes the thing that seems to be missed that we catch at 7 to 14 days is speech therapy and cognitive therapy.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's what we've been missing in the hospital. And when I do the clinical assessment of the patients, whatever is left out, like for example, if the patient needs cardiac monitoring, when we refer the patients appropriately when we see them back. And you're right, I mean, about the therapy, speech therapy and cognitive therapy is something that we address that during the conference visit.
So, biggest thing, and I never really saw that the Compass has done for us, is identified some holes in our program, and the speech therapy is a prime example. We definitely have seen some quality improvement initiatives as a result of Compass, because really I didn't know before starting Compass that these things were getting missed, or they weren't being done, or that the patients were struggling like they were. It's kind of a ignorance is bliss. You don't know what you don't know, and I certainly had no idea. So we've been able to work through and do some education and set up some processes where we can limit these missed therapies and opportunities for incorporating resources for the patient. So that's kind of how our journey started, and then I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about how James, as my backup PAC and the community paramedic, again, he just has been such a great value to our program, and he's on both ends of the spectrum. So he's very involved with the pre-hospital phase, but as well as the post-hospital phase. And I think that's very unique and very helpful for our community. As I think, James, do you want to comment on, because you know the community and you know a lot of the players out in the community, how that works out for you?
Yeah, when we started our community paramedic program, we were already seeing high utilizers of the EMS system for our familiar faces as we had tried to prefer but when we started sitting in on these Compass meetings, we found out that a lot of the stuff we had already been doing. When I went up to Wake Forest and sat into the Compass clinic there, we saw an opportunity to borrow some things from Compass to put back into our program we were already doing, and then it was just a very easy transition into Compass, and having those resources together that Dawn brought in were resources we hadn't heard of, and then we were able to bring resources in that she had never heard of. Because we're a county-based EMS system, we've got a little bit of knowledge of some of those partners that don't really want to come to the table because they might be a small resource and they don't know their fit in. But I think both of our programs have really come together, and we're modeling, we're getting ready to start seeing heart failure patients, and we've taken a lot of the stuff we've learned from Compass and incorporated it into that to move forward. And we already know the success that we've had with this program.
And then I just wanted to tell one more patient story, and James and Tracey both are very aware of this patient. I saw this lady had a stroke. She didn't have a whole lot of resources as far as her home life. So I went to her room, and I oftentimes will literally sit on the bed with the patient if they're sitting up on the side of the bed, and I sat up and I opened her folder, started going over things with her, and I use the magnet in the folder. I don't know if y'all are familiar with the magnet, but there's a magnet that the patient gets to put on the refrigerator with the PAC's phone number, and it outlines the process for them. So that's what I use to really introduce Compass. And so I sat down with her, and whenever, you're meeting your PAC, that's me, And then I, go on to, in 2 days, I'm going to call you, and this is what we're going to talk about. And I literally go A, B, C, D, what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about your medications and make sure you have them all. And so this lady, she broke my heart because she said, this is the most anyone has ever tried to help me. So thought we had her all ready to go home. She was a diabetic. Had the diabetic nurse come and see her, make sure she has all her diabetic supplies, and she told us that she did, and we believed that. And James went to see her at the 2-day visit. Well, she had an insulin pen that she was trying to do her blood sugars, but she was free sticking with the insulin pen to do her blood sugars. And she complained to James that her fingers were really hurting, and it really hurt to give herself insulin shots. Well, because her needle was dull because she was free sticking with that same needle over and over again to check her blood sugars, but she was trying to do the right thing and keep tabs on her blood sugars and do her diabetic care. So then it came out that she was on a very, very expensive insulin that she wasn't going to be able to afford after that pen ran out. So enter James lets me know that this is going on. Enter Tracey to try and find the resources and how can we, get a different insulin for this patient that she can afford. So already we kind of incorporated several community resources to solve this problem. We were able to get her probably 6 months supply of diabetic supplies, and James was able to re-educate her on her diabetic care at home. I think, James, you ended up making several visits to her, did you not? Follow-up?
Yes, she went a little bit longer than some of our other patients that we've had.
Yeah, so we did get her situated. She's doing very well. She has not had any further strokes, and she's had pretty much a full recovery. Her A1C in the hospital was maybe 7.6, and I think the last one that I saw on her was 7.1. So she's doing better with her management. Her blood pressures were well under control, and she's trying to do the right thing. But she has very limited resources, so I'm glad that we were able to connect her, but it's where our community paramedic and then our pharmacy services really were vital in helping that patient.
So what I'll share is, of course, I don't cover the whole state. I just cover 27 counties in the east. And so what's been interesting over this is to share the outpatient side of things with the inpatient side and vice versa. So it's a learning experience for both of us. So however, there is within Community Care of North Carolina, has anyone heard of Community Care of North Carolina? So within that, we sort of work with our Medicaid recipients, beneficiaries across the state, and there are 14 networks. So I have 13 other colleagues that are across the state that I will connect you guys with if you don't already know who they are, and so they can participate and be part of your initial work group and get to meet and greet, and so they can help you guys locally as I've been able to help Dawn and James in Lenoir County.
Did everyone know and hear about the Community Care Network pharmacy program? Most of you did.
I did not know about them when we first started. I met Tracey at our community network meeting, and then she actually, about a week later, reached out to me and said, let's meet and talk about this. And so I was like, okay. I wasn't sure what we were going to meet about, but she came and we had good discussions about how she could help me and how she could be a part of the Compass program. And it just kind of evolved from there. And then as we got patients now, we meet or at least communicate on a very regular basis about, what's going on with Compass, what's going on with our patients, and how can she be a help to our patients, and how can she help guide the process for me. So.
And then Skip and I will talk about the Community Pharmacy Enhanced Service Network, which is where our community pharmacies actually have joined a network as part of our medical home model within CCNC. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So that's further outreach of where you guys can involve the community pharmacies, where we know that through our Medicaid recipients that they see their primary care provider 2 to 3 times a year compared to where they see their community pharmacist about 20 to 30 times a year. So your community pharmacies really have a great relationship with these patients. And some of them do have what we call enhanced services. And so these are the things that we incorporated into this model. And then if there's patients who potentially need those enhanced services, you can make referrals to those pharmacies as well, discuss that with the patients. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later on today.
Can we also hear from the physician?
Dr. Gahlot, they'd like to hear from you.
So, Dr. Gahlot, could you just speak for a moment about your perspective of Compass and what it's meant to your practice? Did you hear?
Okay. Can you repeat that question for me? I was not hearing very clearly.
So they would like to hear how that has impacted your practice with the Compass project, Dr. Gahlot.
Yeah, it's basically, it's patient satisfaction, and the patients love the program. It is, I think it's a very, very good program. Whenever I see a stroke patient in the hospital, I identify a patient who might go home. I always text Dawn and make sure that she sees the patient. And when they come back, the patients absolutely love the program. The personalization and I think it just brings on and it just binds everything together and gives an excellent care to the patients.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I got a question for you.
Sure.
For those patients identified with cognitive deficits, what resources will you utilize? What resources would you like to utilize?
So what we have available to us is very limited in our, so most of the time we will refer them to speech therapy outpatient services for therapy. Sometimes we can incorporate some other services that are more on a social level that will help them. We have one patient, she liked art, and we have an arts council that has classes. So I sent her I encouraged her to go to classes at the art center, and she actually called me and said, I think that's helping me as much as the speech therapy is helping me. So again, kind of thinking outside the box and utilizing things that are in your community that may not necessarily be on the list of the traditional things that may help. Yes.
I'd also like to add, with our pharmacy care networks, they have also been great in helping us get blister packs for these cognitively impaired patients and really helping the family so some of the tools we use help identify the cognitive impairments that the family knows they have, and then we actually bring it to light. We show the family that the patient can't care for their medications anymore, and then we get the the network involved and get blister packs to the family, and so I think that also the pharmacy's been huge.
Yeah, or I've called Tracey to find out where, for maybe a patient that's not on Medicaid, where those blister packs can be done at the cheapest rate for a patient that may have to pay an extra fee for that service. So that's another way.
So I think that we're finding that, not just in this study, but another study that Amy and I are involved in, is that the cognitive deficits, especially in those who are mild and moderate, go unrecognized. And we also find, the clinicians say, why do I need to assess it? Because we don't know that cognitive therapy works, right? And we don't have overwhelming evidence that cognitive therapy works. However, it's exactly what Christina and Sarah said. And I just told you, 37% of the patients with mild and moderate stroke, they're failing one of the 3 cognitive screens. And 75% are on greater than 5 meds. So it takes a pretty good cognitive function to manage 5 meds. So what we need to know is do these patients have cognitive impairments and how it influences their medication management is really, really critical. And so that's a resource. We have the lowest, in the e-care plan, as you'll see, those functional assessments, you got them. You don't get out until you do them. And so we've got a 98.9% uptake of those functional assessments. However, when we go to the APP or the physician assessment for cognition and expanded screening, we don't have such a good uptake. And we want to try to improve this in the next round because this really does drive the patient's ability to manage their health, right? It's really critical. That's all I had to say.
Okay. So,
Did I speak loud
just
enough?
actually, Rita, just the other day, because I was entering patient information in, and it actually came up with an alert about the cognitive assessment, and I couldn't figure out what I had entered that would trigger that on that particular patient, and so she said, yeah, it gets triggered, we just didn't have an alert before. It's still not exactly sure why that patient got triggered, but anyway, so now there's an alert. Hey, you need to do this.
So to address that point, a lot of the times the APPs or who was doing, or physicians who was doing the APP said, well, the patient doesn't need that. Well, in reality, they may be talking to you, but they got cognitive problems, and we've screened them, and they failed one of the 3 cognitive. So we were finding a lot of missing MOCAs because, well, the patient's talking to me, I don't see a cognitive deficit, and in reality, they do have one, right? And it affects their overall ability to manage. I mean, I take one medicine a day, and I have to have a routine to make sure I do it. A lot of people would question my cognitive function, but it's hard. It's really hard, right? So we want you to be true to the fact that the 3 cognitive screens are very simple. Do you know what day, time, and year it is, right? And can you recall 3 objects? And can you do an oral trails V? And it takes a fair amount of function to manage. 5 minutes.
Anything else? Questions? No?
So, Dr. Gahlot and James, can you hear me? Can you hear me? It's Sylvia. It's Sylvia. Hey. Thank you so much. I can see you and you can't see me, which is really weird for me because I want you to see me. So I can thank you so much for all you do all the time and for taking time out of your busy schedules to join Dawn and Tracey for this panel. But a couple of things. Dr. Gahlot, you brought up a really good point that I want to highlight, and that is how you text Dawn. So this is one thing we'll talk more about this as we talk about implementing the intervention. But one of the things that we highly encourage our sites to do, so listen to this is really, really important, is you figure out how do you give other urgent messages. Like our Vanguard site knows how to do this really well. But how do you give other urgent messages and use that same system, whether it's texting, like Dr. Gahlot texts Dawn, when she has a patient that she thinks is going to be going home, a TIA or a stroke patient. So it could be texting, it could be beeping, it could be buzzing, it could be emailing. Whatever you do in your hospital for other important messages to communicate with each other, be thinking about that. Because that's how you're going to identify these patients. Kimberly and Pam and I were talking a little bit earlier about how fast these patients go home. And not just TIA patients. I mean, they go home before we hardly even know they were there. They're already out the door. But even some of the stroke patients, they're going home in an average of 2 or 3 days, and while they're there, they're in this big whirlwind. And so we're trying to figure out, are they going home? Are they not going home? So whoever might know that, it might be your discharge planner, it might be a social worker, it might be a hospitalist, it could be someone like Dr. Gahlot, who's rounding, a neurologist rounding on patients, inpatient. But find out who those people are. They're going to be key to you identifying these patients, and so that you can get by to see them before they actually leave the hospital. Because as Dawn says, she actually sits on the side of the bed with them. And tomorrow, when we talk about the nitty-gritties of how to actually perform the discharge visit, and the 2-day call, and the 7 to 14-day visit, and so on and so forth. We're going to give some really good examples, and Dawn's going to go over that with you in the morning. She's going to tag team with me on that. But just make sure, because you want to, if at all possible, that is just key, is seeing that patient, because Dawn can probably speak to this a lot better than even I can, but we know it just makes sense. Think about if you're that patient in the hospital and you connect with someone and they tell you, I'm going to call you in 2 days and I'm going to be there at the visit with you, and I'm going to be every step of the way. And I don't want to spill what Dawn's stories, but she lets them know that she's got their back. And if I know someone's got my back and you tell me you're going to call me in a day or two, I'm going to be listening out for that call. So it really starts right there in the hospital, that relationship, that rapport. So I don't know if there's anything else, and that was a lot of information, Dr. Gahlot, but if there's anything else you want to say about how you text on or how you two communicate on identifying the patient, but anything else that you do that might be helpful for these new sites that are getting ready to launch.
I would just say that the patients, a lot of patients have been very, very appreciative of this program. And I'm going to give you just an example that, sometimes if the patients are not, they have a lot of questions. Families have a lot of questions in the hospital. They have a lot of anxiety in the hospital. And when they know that they are getting enrolled in this comprehensive program, post-stroke care, they're really appreciative about it. So in my practice, I think it's just, I have heard a lot of good things from the patient, and they feel safe. They feel they're being taken care of, and I think this is a great program.
Thank you so much. I think that's a couple of other really key points that she said. Patient satisfaction, she's mentioned that, Dawn's mentioned that, Tracey's mentioned that. So better outcomes, and if you're having better outcomes, of course, you're going to be more satisfied. So the patient and the caregiver, and this is a really scary thing, especially these big bad strokes. So, we really need to make sure that we're surrounding these patients. And that's the other thing I just want to mention that they talked about so beautifully is we're preparing you today and tomorrow. You all know we're already, my nickname, you can call me this, it's fine, is BD, and that's for Big Dog because I beg and I hound all the time. I beg and I hound, I beg and I hound, I beg and I hound. So that's how we get it done, right? We beg and we hound. So we've been begging, Laurie's been helping me with it, and Rico, we're begging and we're hounding to get ready for your site visits. So you see the criticality now of that blasted CRM grid, the community resource. Kimberly's going, that grid, Laurie's making me do this grid, and I don't know what I'm going to do with this grid. Well, this is what you're going to do with the grid. It's really critical because Tracey was at that initial site visit for Lenoir. She was there. They didn't know each other. And within, 2 weeks you were calling on Tracey?
Probably within a week.
A week or two. So, and as Dawn said, she didn't know all the people in the community, but Tracey's a community pharmacist, so she knew a lot of the people. So over the next 2 days, we're going to talk more and more and more about getting you ready for that site visit. Teresa's been through it because she's representing 3 hospitals in the Charlotte market. So she knows the value of the community resources. And we're going to talk more and more about this because it takes a village. You all know that. And Aisha's shaking her head. You know what I'm saying. It takes a village to surround these patients. And some of us know inpatient, some of us know outpatient, some of us know community. And so we want to get all of those people in the same room to talk about how they're going to support the post-acute coordinator, those of you who are the DOMs at your hospital, but also the patients and the caregivers. So we're getting you ready for that too. That's a big piece of what we wanted you to hear from how they collaborate. James, is there anything else you would like to say? Because you're such a key piece. You not only are you a paramedic out there in the community, but you do some inpatient in the ED and otherwise. Is there anything else you want to say about how you and Dawn work together as the backup? I'm not sure if you can hear me. James, can you hear me? I'm thinking that's a no to that. I'm thinking that's a no. But what I wanted to say about that is you're going to hear over the next couple of days, you're going to hear a lot about backups too. You're still identifying your initial teams, but once you do, none of you are 24/7. We do let you have a little bit of time off, vacations, go to your kids' soccer games, that kind of thing. So, you have to do that. So getting a backup in place. And Dawn has such an awesome backup. I mean, that's how she can be here. She came into town yesterday afternoon for a telestroke conference, and then she's here today and tomorrow. Well, if she didn't have a backup, who's seeing these patients, right? There's a clinic tomorrow. Life goes on. The life of these patients and caregivers go on. So it's critical that you have a backup for your post-acute coordinator and you have a backup for your advanced practice provider. So be thinking about that. Not to overwhelm you today. You're still putting your teams together, but as you are, that's something really important to think about. And I don't know, James, can you hear me now? I know I went away for a little bit. Can you hear me now? Okay, so what I was asking, if there's anything else you want to say about the importance of backup and how you and Dawn tag team with the patients. Oh, sorry. Can't hear me? Can you hear me? Dawn, try and see if we can hear you.
James, can you hear me?
I hear you, Dawn.
So she wanted to know if there's anything else that you would like to say about how we work together with you as my backup, or the importance of having a backup and how it's worked for us.
Yeah, I would just encourage everybody. I mean, we've kind of shown that, thinking out of the box has worked. And don't be afraid to talk to your local EMS agencies, because they are wanting to get involved in outcomes. They're wanting to get involved in these community paramedic programs, and they want to start them. And some of them don't have ways of doing it because there's not a lot of feedback coming out of hospitals on these patients and what they can do. The program, our local programs, it does help us. It helps our call volume because our call volume is constantly going up with the EMS. And if we can get on with the hospital to get the support and have that funnel of referrals, then it helps us on the front end not run more EMS calls, don't have to put an additional truck on. But at the same time, we're here for the patients of this county. They're the ones that pay their taxes, that take care of us. So we're always looking for opportunities. Every week I talk to the hospital to find out if there's another way that we can help them to help our community. And this Compass program was just excellent. And, one of the stories that really hit me was, we've had some locally, but before I even knew that Compass was coming to our hospital, and I went to the clinic at Wake Forest, they were seeing a patient, and this lady come in who she was able to drive herself there, I believe, but she sat there and she cried because she knew that the help that she was getting there was just above and beyond anything she'd ever received before. And she cried. She had some, depression just from the disabilities that she had after the stroke, but the team was there to just help her, redirect her, and help her continue to live her life the way she needed to. I think she had just retired, and I always feel bad for people that they work their entire lives, retire, they have a stroke, and then there's nothing there for them. That whole life has changed, and to see the work that they have done with this program, and to really get it out to the stage is just amazing. And that's what we want to see here. Our population is getting older in our county, and we just want to see them have a active life and get out and do things. Because if they just sit at home, it does go into our revenue base. We don't collect sales tax. There's just little things like that we see people that can't get out anymore. There's nothing, and we don't want to see the community fall apart. So Compass program has just really opened our eyes to a lot with not only resources, but also doing what's right for the patient with other disease processes, and it's a real good template for us.
One thing I want to add is the compliance. A lot of patients who are usually non-compliant, they have history of non-compliance. You notice that the Compass program, they have been more compliant with the office visits, so it actually improves the compliance of the patients.
It's kind of funny that she said that because we were joking yesterday, there's always that patient that when you come to clinic and you're waiting, like, oh, they're not going to get no shirt. That's the patient that shows up. And that's really good. They in our local area, we don't have a lot of public transportation. Well, really, no public transportation. And that's always our hurdle, but they always figure out some way of getting here. I think a lot of it has to do with the way Dawn coaches them before discharge, and then in the follow-up phone call, how beneficial it can be to come in, and we just know about it because the patient you don't expect to show up, they're here.
So I think that when you hear Dawn tomorrow, when you hear what she tells the patient, she says to the patient, the conversation she has, you will know why they show up. Because if they don't show up, she's going to come and get them. She's going to get James to come and get them. Somebody's going to come and get them and bring them to you, Dr. Gahlot, right? That's what's going to happen. Any other questions for Dawn, Tracey, James, Dr. Gahlot? One of the amazing teams that we have. Yeah,
I have
Christy.
a question. Dawn, you're in UNC system also. We're PharmD up in Hendersonville. And I was just curious, what other jobs do you have besides the stroke coordinator? Are you like everything for cardiovascular, or do you have other jobs?
So our stroke program, they wrote a grant, and within that grant was funded just a stroke program coordinator. So there's another person that handles the cardiac stuff. And so at that time, we were not part of UNC. And so I am stroke program coordinator and PAC.
Because they tell me in our budget, we're the same size hospital. We're 220 bed licensed. We run about 160 open beds at any given time. Our census runs around 100.
You guys are going to be really good friends.
Right. It sounds exactly, and we're both UNC, but I'm everything, and we're very dedicated to our STEMI program right now, and to cardiology, so the resources for this, I'm telling David he's going to have to do the pre and then educate himself about the patient's needs and then because I'm not going to be able to get over to the office to help him with these, so, and a backup, there is no one else. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, so right now, we have someone else that handles the other programs. But this, one thing that I found that Compass became my stroke program. So as you become more embedded in Compass, that is your stroke program. So it became much less overwhelming. Because my process, once we get out of the ED, really turns to the focus on the Compass model of care, and so it was much easier incorporated than I thought it was going to be initially.
What about, because they're a very similar hospital, what about looking into the local community like they did with the EMS program? I think that's how you got around that barrier.
Right? Because James is your backup, which who would have thought that EMTs would
So, when I was one of the hounded, not only for the grid, but also for a backup. And so when I was thinking about it, kept on emailing me and calling me and saying, think about your backup. And within our hospital, I couldn't think of anyone that really fit, that knew stroke, that had an interest. And but James was already so engaged in such a big part, he took it upon himself to come out here to shadow in their clinic. And so to me, he was the most logical, and I kept on going back, but the most logical person is not a person that's even employed by our hospital. So we just kind of found a way to make it work, and it works for us.
And when we come out to your sites, we can try to help brainstorm, and that's the great thing about the site visits, because everybody's so different, and I think this is what sheds such a great light on their program, is how different they are. Everybody's different, so Compass is really just going to integrate into your program, and then we learn from your program, because then we can share it with others, and so that's how unique it is.
Something you may also want to consider is your hospital pharmacist. We have another hospital that the pharmacy notifies the PAC because she's remote, but every time they dispense certain meds for the ED. So the hospital pharmacist is a good resource for that as well, to make sure no patients are missed.
And this is why we had, over the past 2 or 3 weeks, we've been having those pre-boot camp conversations with you to get you ready for boot camp, and then site-specific, and then your launch, and how we've been talking about who could possibly do what. And as Christina said, when we come out to the site-specific visit, and those are going to happen over the next month or so, then we'll talk even more about what gaps do you still have, and how are we going to fill those gaps. And we do have to think about, and I'll ask you so many questions, and you'll say, why is she asking me all these questions? And it's to get to, because now we have like 21 sites of experience. We have a Vanguard site, but we have 20 other intervention sites. And every one of those sites has done Compass just a little bit differently. Just a little bit differently, and some a whole lot differently. So, any other questions for our panel?
This is your opportunity to let your hospital focus on stroke too, instead of just STEMI, to bring that aspect up. So,
Right. I telling the
Yeah.
CV service line manager that CV does include stroke.
Yes. And
They literally were upset that I was coming here today because they're not paying for it, so it's not coming out of anybody's budget, so they didn't know because it's stroke. And
Yeah.
they don't focus on that at all.
And I will say at Wake Forest, we're extending this model of care to our heart center now. And so they're coming and shadowing, and so it's an ideal for both the disease states, so, but it's funny that you said that.
One
Yeah.
suggestion maybe is to look at your readmission rate.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking the same. What's the date
We
show?
have a really good transitional care team, which I'm starting to work with. So I think that's probably, that's because of readmission rates that we have that good transition care. And they're just now fully staffed, and they're talking to me about how can we help you with stroke. So I know that's where I'm going to get a backup from.
Nice.
And I know that there's something out there for community resources. I just personally don't know how I'm going to manage all of it. We'll figure it out.
Nobody does at your stage.
Listen to Dawn, oh my God, what did I just say?
It was like 3 days before she called, and she was like, what?
But I do think what you'll find is now, if you got a good transitional care team, there's a lot to be learned from this model for others too. And actually, we are developing a cardiac suite similar to this with congestive heart failure and other things. So, and Amy and I have a big project with Dr. Kitzman and Duke and so forth. But so it's you can teach one, learn one. And so I think building that team in there really does make a difference in terms of, if that's where you go first, to get them aligned with you and
Other questions or comments for the team?
Yeah.
Katie?
We're just now working on our community resource, pulling it all together. Sorry. We're just now working on the community resource, and we're a small community, don't have a whole lot of resources out there. But in about a 5-minute internet search, the amount of community resources that I found that were already put in place by senior services, The health department was amazing for us to be able to pull together what we needed. So when it comes to those community resources, a simple internet search, a lot of it is out there. You just have to go and find it. It's not like you have to go and discover things. Thinking outside of the box, definitely, but when you're looking just for those basic community services, you can find those brochures pretty easily.
And I think we found, don't overwhelm yourself, just go for your key ones, right?
Yeah.
To begin with, and build those relationships. And as I said, those first 4 key ones are falls prevention, community-based pharmacist, area agency on aging, and your support groups. That's your key ones, and then we can add the others. And the wellness programs. And that's really important.
And to add on that, one of the key things, especially for your younger stroke patients, is even though the area agencies on aging are for people 60 and older, well, 2 things. I think if the caregiver or the stroke patient are over 60, or does it have to be the patient? The patient has to be over 60 or over. But they
the caregiver
could also be over
Yeah,
60.
either one.
Yeah, so if you have a 55-year-old caregiver and a 60-year-old patient or vice versa, then they can help you. But they also can hopefully help connect you up with other services, even if they can't provide services for the patient that for whom you're seeking services. So they're really good resources because they tend to know what other things are available in their communities.
And we'll say it quietly, and Laura, don't listen, but sometimes they will cheat a little bit too. If you have a really good partner and you've got someone that's not 55 to 60, they really might be willing to help you out and go ahead and make an exception, because this is a very inclusive model. We look for ways to include patients and caregivers, not ways to exclude them. And as you build your partnerships in your communities, you will find that. You will have a lot of help. The other thing I want to say is, and Debbie's exiting right now, but she's new on our team, and she's been helping us get a lot more community resources in to get ready for you all launching. And the other advantage you have crossing over to the intervention now is, for example, like down in Charlotte, we have already identified a lot of resources. They're already in Mecklenburg County. So, we've been working on this for over a year with our current intervention hospitals, and some of them overlap. So you're going to have a lot of resources already in there, and then you can take your searches and see what's not in there. We talk about that at the site-specific visit. We share with you what community resources we have in there for your county, and then you can look and see what might be missing and share that with, with your partners who might help identify. I'm getting the high sign for 1 minute, so we have 1 minute. Any other questions or comments? Anyone? I'd like to thank James and Dr. Gahlot again. I hope you can hear me. We appreciate you so much, not only for today, but all you do all of the time on behalf of your patients and caregivers, and for Dawn's leadership and Tracey. Let's give them a round of applause.